Welcome back. I think we could start. It's 10:51. Welcome back for that session on the CRA, one of the numerous sections of the CRA Methodologies. And for that session, we have two speakers. We have one speaker which is here, which is Nikos Mavrogiannopoulos, sorry, I don't say it right, which will discuss methodology for the CRA. And then we'll get a panel on the CRA. So first of all, I give the floor to Nikos. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Nikos Mavrogiannopoulos, and I'm going to present you about meter embed and how we can use meter embed to bring security in products and meet the CRA, so to combine compliance with security. Yeah, there's a microphone. I hope it works. Let me, first things first, who am I? I'm a product security professional. I work in designing secure products. I come from Greece, but I live in Brno. And for the several years in the past, I have been working with US products. I'm very familiar with the US regulations. And I would say I was fortunate, or sometimes you would say unfortunate, to learn all the way how the federal system works, how the security regulations are applying in the US. And that was until 2020, where this thing happened. So CRA started being more tangible. We had the first drafts. If I remember well, I had a new job, and I had new responsibilities to focus on EU. So let me say at this point that I work for ASABLOY. ASABLOY is a provider of access solutions, but here the opinions are my own. So that was for me an unfamiliar territory. Although I live in Europe, I work in Europe, I was not very familiar with declaration of conformity, all the paperwork you needed to complete the CE marking. And as I said, I work in a provider of access solutions. So in the world of physical locks, you have a lot of standards. So I understood for the CRA, you have to meet the standards that will be developed by ETSIS and ELEC. And so in this world, locks, I knew that locks are made to meet these standards. So you have, in fact, you can be assured that when you buy a lock and you check what standard it meets, that it's good enough, or it's a little better than the other solutions. And you can be assured they provide some basic level of security. At the same time, you know that locks can be lockpicked. It doesn't matter what standard they meet, they can still be lockpicked. So usually what makes a lock better or worse is the experience of the manufacturer. What experience they have, what countermeasures they have deployed there. So the standards do not play really a role in that aspect, in having a clever person breaking it. And that connects this presentation with the rest presentations in the sense that we're discussing CRA is going to solve the cybersecurity problem, but I would say there are two different dimensions. We want the CRA is bringing the regulatory requirements, the compliance requirements, and there is another dimension that we need a secure product, and these are not the same. So that was my task, my personal challenge, how to manage this, how to make sure that we can design secure products, and we also meet the compliance requirements. If we stay only using our in-house expertise, we'll make secure products. If we just take the ETSI standards, the SNLX standards, we'll make compliant products. But what we wanted is to have both secure and compliant products. How do we find equilibrium there? So I started checking what exists out there. how other industries solve this. And I started with the safety dimension, and that is the aviation industry. They're very long in the field, and after the 1930s, they started deploying checklists because they had a few accidents. So they realized that the checklist is the solution to the human brain being distracted sometimes and forgetting to do something that looks, after the incident, it looks very unreasonable to do. So the checklist manifesto, this book that I list there, I didn't write this book, so I'm not promoting it actually, but it's a book that brings this checklist approach from the aviation industry to the medicine industry. And it's written by an actual doctor, Mr. Atul Gawande, and he extends this approach to medicine. So when a surgeon, for example, does a surgery, he argues that, yeah, it makes sense to have a checklist. So when you have a surgery, he doesn't forget something inside the patient. So that resonated very much with me and kept it as a North Star. I think checklists are a good thing. So what was the actual landscape? How do we do risk assessments today in products? So we have approaches like STRIDE, threat modeling approaches like STRIDE, attack trees, for example. That they're very, very good approaches. So if you're using them today and they work, yeah, I would say continue using them. But they have an aspect of brainstorming, of a continuous brainstorming. There are a structured brainstorming approach, and you realize you are thinking too much to find things that in similar products you kind of reinventing the wheel each and every time, and you are spending a week or two to actually reinvent this wheel. We have other approaches like the OWASP ASVS. That's a checklist approach, actually, a very long checklist approach. If you're developing a web application, you get 350 controls to validate. So you develop your application, you take the OWASP checklist, you go 350 controls, whether they apply to you or not, you check, you comply or not. That's also a nice approach. It's kind of tedious, but it kind of works for web applications. And we also have the CENELEC ETSI standards. We have quite a few of them. But as I said, this is more about compliance, these standards, rather than real security in a field where you are an expert. So in this investigation of mine last year, I was in this conference, and Adam Hahn from Mitre presented Mitre Embed. So if you don't know Mitre, Mitre is the organization behind the CVE framework, also the attack framework. So they are a non-governmental organization from the US that they do a lot of things with security. What I loved in Embed is it takes away the brainstorming factor of STRIDE. So it's a threat modeling approach that takes away the brainstorming approach. And it's pretty easy to explain, but let me explain it graphically. So how does it work? You have a list of properties, and you describe your product by selecting a few properties. So you have properties like it has a bootloader, it has a kernel, this product has this or that. You select them, and you get an associated list of threats. So by selecting the properties, you get the threats that correspond to the properties you selected. And as a bonus, you also get some best practice mitigation. So for the threats that you have selected, you also see the mitigations that correspond to this threat. And in practice, an interface looks like that in the screen. That's an interface we have developed internally, for example. And imagine, so you go through this approach, you describe your products by selecting a few properties, you check your threats, you integrate this into your risk management framework. For example, you can associate risks and impact risks and feasibility risk on the threats, so you can merge it with your risk assessment framework. You can select your mitigations, and you can get a very good summary of your risk assessment. And I skip a lot of things here about MitraEmbed. MitraEmbed is itself a very comprehensive database of information for threats with associated CVEs, associated CWEs, and so on. And it looked great from the security perspective, but as I said, I wanted to solve both. I wanted to solve the security aspect and the compliance aspect. So my question was, will this thing align with the CRA? Can we have a product in the default level? Because the default level is the level where CRA actually doesn't give you any requirement to comply with any harmonized standards, so you can select your standard. Can we have a product that, by meeting MitraEmbed, we can actually comply with CRA? And if we take the essential requirements, the first one, you have to ensure appropriate level of cybersecurity based on risks. And MitraEmbed, that's exactly what it does. So it aligns very well. But if we start examining the threats available, we can see a discrepancy on some of the requirements. And we have to remember here, Mitra is a US organization. They have a different culture, different background, and they don't have CRA. So things like personal data, it was a key missing item. Their personal data handling is not the same in the US. With Europe, GDPR has really been embedded in Europe, whereas in the US they have a different approach to privacy regulations. Default configurations are another. In the US company, it's very common to see the approach, we write in the manual that the user has to do this and that. CRA changes this and says all the responsibility is on the manufacturer, so the configuration must be default. So these two examples show kind of the discrepancy that was there in the threats that were present in MitraEmbed with the requirements, the essential requirements of CRA. So to visualize the gap, actually, if we take a Gartner-style demonstration, we are there with MitraEmbed. We have good enough security. We don't have good enough CRA compliance. So what we want to do, what I wanted to do is actually do that. I need to get there. And how to do that? So what I try to do is imagine we could extend the MitraEmbed with additional threats, with additional mitigations, so that we can have it aligning with all the essential requirements of Part 1. And I tried it for insecure default configurations, personal data leak, exposure of personal information, exposure of personal known vulnerabilities at release time. So I tried it, and I reached out to Adam, and we kind of synced on the goal of meeting the CRA in the next releases. At the same time, it's not clear whether Mitra will actually go there at this point and will make MitraEmbed fully aligning with CRA, but it would be great. So we don't need to have an EU MitraEmbed, and so we have just one framework we can be working with. And and when we have this, when we have the alignment of MitraEmbed with CRA, we can create something like this. You can create a mapping of the threats available in Mitra to the essential requirements available in the CRA, so you can demonstrate to market authorities the work you have done in your risk assessment and in meeting the CRA essential requirements. And in practice, this is a framework that I would say looks very, very promising. And you can go further than that, because embedded is not just a compliance tool, right? It's a security framework. What if you can layer your organizational knowledge on top of it? Local threats, local mitigations that you examine, that you bring based on your engineer's expertise. You bring your internal practices all mapped to the CRA, you test it, works, and you get the both of the two worlds. So now I turn back to my original North Star. So the North Star is to create a checklist. And essentially, Meter Embed, this is what it gives you. It gives you a checklist of the requirements based on the databases you have selected. But it's a checklist that is not something like OWASP ASVS. You don't get 350 controls. You get a tailored checklist that depends on the properties of your application. So by selecting your properties and getting your local experience into Meter Embed, you can reach compliance and security. That's something, let's say, we have tried it and it worked for us. So that gives you one piece of the puzzle. That will not, you will not meet the whole CRA just with Meter Embed, but you meet a very large aspect of the part 1 requirements. You will not find this ready-made. You will need to bring your experience into the database, but what I need to give you here is that I have tried it and it works. So thank you very much.
Vignoli here. I work for Norton. Do you have, I mean, what you did is sounds like a good approach to map the different requirements from the CRA perspective. Did you achieve a full matching of the specific requirements? Because there are also this plenty of other standards, many standards. Is it okay or not?
So maybe.
About the horizontal standard, do you have full mapping with this MITRE?
You mean something like PD2? Yeah, that's a good question. So in this approach that we followed, we ignore completely PD2 because PD2 is not a harmonized standard. So in the default category, you don't have to meet it. It would be good if you can meet it. But I would say what you need is to meet the essential requirements if you are in the default category. And if you can prove based on your experience that you meet the essential requirements, that's sufficient for the regulator. Nevertheless, you can map PD2 if you like, if you think this is your approach, right? Each one follows their own path. If PD2 is what you think aligns better with your product, you can bring the PD2 requirements in meter embed. I haven't read the latest version of PD2, so I don't know if it aligns with this approach, property threat mitigation. But I'm assuming, having seen several of the vertical standards, this looks a very an approach that most of the standards align with.
Are there
Does it work? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's on. Okay. So yeah, hi, I'm Gokul from TUV. My question deals with the thread modeling approach, right? So you mentioned about the stride approach. So that is brought into as part for your thread modeling. Do you think that the CRA focuses on stride because it's most popular and it's unfair on other thread modeling approaches because it indirectly, even the vertical standards, right? 62443, 21434, all of them focus more on the stride approach and less on other approaches like PASTA, Evita, and so on. So do you think that the approach will change if you use a different thread modeling approach rather than using just stride?
Yeah, very nice question. I think CRA kind of ignores the risk assessment. It tells you you have to do it, but you have to figure out how to do it. And if you ask 2, 3 experts, they will all bring you different approaches, whichever they like. And yeah, that was an uncertainty I had to fight in the beginning from the CRA. And that's why I examined all the methodologies that were there. Stride, attack trees, I saw a little of PASTA. What I didn't like from these methodologies is that they're unpredictable. That if you do the risk assessment, if I do the risk assessment, if a third person does the risk assessment, the results will not be the same. Whereas on meter embed, it was very repeatable. That was a property that I didn't see to any other methodology. The repeatable results were something that I thought they were very defensive. Defensive in the sense that you can defend them. And I believe they aligned with the CRA more than any other methodology I have seen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Are there another question? No? Okay, so if not, I propose to close the discussion here. You still have the possibility to discuss offline, indeed, with Nicholas.
Thanks.
So for the next session, we'll be having a panel about the CRA implementation and the benefit of harmonized standards. And this panel is led by Omar Daher from Digital Europe. So please, Omar, I think you can slowly get on stage. We're a bit ahead of time, so I think give you time to call your panelists and introduce them.
Good morning, everyone, for our panel on the CRA implementation, harmonized standards, and compliance. My name is Omar Daher. I am the Associate Director at Digital Europe on Standardization and Compliance Policy. We have a panel today comprising of the Commission, the standardizers, and the industry to discuss and see how we are going to proceed with the implementation of the CRA, the role of harmonized standards, and other compliance routes if needed. And with that, allow me to welcome to the stage our panelists. We start with the Commission, Luis Miguel, the Coordinator of International Cybersecurity Policy at DG Connect. Welcome. Our standardizers, behind, of course, the scene and doing our great job in Sansanelic and ETSI. We start with Angrid. Sorry, your last name is very difficult for me, but Severine Glog, the convener of Working Group 5 at JTC 21, in AI, Cybersecurity for AI. Simon Phipps, the TC Cyber EU SR Vice Chair. And lastly, from the industry, Alexander Isenberger from TSH Home Compliance. For transparency matters, he is also our Cybersecurity Working Group Chair at Digital Europe. But he is talking today on behalf of TSH Home Appliances, the company, and not the association. And with that, we have now the full panel. We can start. So maybe I join you if the microphone works. Otherwise, can you hear me? No.
Hello.
Probably these are not CRA compliant, so we will fix that. So I'll stay here for a moment until things are better. But let's start with our panel. So as we know all, the CRA requirements are kicking in. The whole of requirements will be, of course, on the 11th of December 2027, but we have immediate requirements coming up in August and in October, and these are linked to the harmonized standards being developed at Sansanelic and ETSI. So my first questions to the panelists, and maybe I start with Luis Miguel. How do you assess the progress of standardization for the CRA so far? And given the immediate deadlines, the ones coming now in August 2026, and the ones also coming in by the end of December 2027, 11th December to be exact, how do you assess the progress so far?
Hello. Yes, it works. Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to this interesting panel. Our assessment is very positive. I have to say that we are happy with the work being done by the standardizers at this stage. I have to say that the Commission has been closely following the development of the standards by not only by replying to legal questions, that it's our main role, but also by funding the participation of certain parts of the industry in the development of the standards, rapporteurs, the different roles. And in this regard, what I can tell you is that in general terms, as I said, we are happy with the results of with the progress of the standardization. We are, let me explain what I'm going to say. We are relatively on time. We had a very tight schedule, but in principle, we are okay. We are on time. There are some slight delays in some standards that we are trying to address because, as you know, our main priorities were to focus on the vertical standards so that manufacturers of important and critical products can at least benefit from presumption of conformity, and we could provide legal certainty and legal clarity as a benchmark for these manufacturers. But then, of course, when it comes to horizontal standards, and especially vulnerability handling standard, which is part of the essential requirements, we are paying a lot of attention to it. So this being said, I would say that on verticals, it's our main priority. Progress is on track, we are on track, and we are paying attention to the small delays that we are observing.
Thank you. Right, Aisha? Yeah, this one works. So Ingrid, I think I failed to mention that you are also in JTC 13 following the work on CRA standardization. And specifically now we're talking with vulnerability handling, which is, I think, the one that's coming up in August. How do you see the progress?
Thank you very much for inviting to this conference, and thank you for being here. Yes, I'm working as well in Working Group 9, but my main focus is in JTC 21 for cybersecurity for AI systems, but it belongs very much together. So I bring you the newest information from Working Group 9 about that. And let's start with the vulnerability handling. We talked about that yesterday, and there will be a meeting tomorrow about this in addition. The status is currently the comments after inquiry. For those who do not know what inquiry means, this is in between public conversation with the national bodies and the experts all over Europe, and then a lot of comments came back to the group and they need to be resolved, and in this status they are. And there is an additional step for final vote. This is before, so the result is that they plan to have it public and ready in December 26, but there are some issues to be solved because we have currently the situation that you can make the national bodies happy but not the Commission, or vice versa. So there is something to discuss also tomorrow. Let's see. And for the other both horizontals, and it's a bit unfortunate that they are behind the verticals because they should be used by the verticals. We have PT1, which is the principles and risk and life cycle part. This is also after this public inquiry and is planned for October 26 this year to be public. I think that's not that difficult at the moment. It looks good. But PT2, what we discussed just for Mitra, is planned for April next year. And this includes all these generic 13 requirements, and they think they go to public inquiry in May this year. So, but then other steps needs to follow, so that the result is that they plan to have it in April, ready next year. So this is the current plan from yesterday, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we can add one comment to be resolved in the discussions: vulnerability on mics, connecting wirelessly.
I hope there will be a close.
Apologies. I think they are going on and off, but apologies for that. I hope you can still hear us. So please shout if you have difficulties. Simon, I turn on to you now. You are more in charge of the vertical standards, so they are coming next in October. As previously said, they kind of depend also on the horizontal in some issues. So how do you assess the process so far?
So creating the vertical standards has been quite challenging. The fact that the horizontal specs that we're supposed to normatively reference aren't finished means that the rapporteurs are torn between writing their own text for the vulnerability handling and waiting for the PT3 to complete. We're relying on PT3, so I hope it's going to happen. And I was seeing, Angelo is here, so I've been chasing him up. Yes. The other problem we've had at ETSI is that ETSI's norm for developing standards involves industry participation, and there has been very, very little industry participation. So we've been able to complete the vertical standards quite rapidly because just the rapporteurs alone have written them. But we're now getting to the point where people are beginning to see these standards and comment on them heavily, and we're anticipating quite a high comment resolution burden in the back end of the process because of that. So I agree with Luis Miguel that we're pretty much on time. I am less optimistic about what's going to happen next because I think the combination of the other thing we've been doing innovatively in the vertical standards is all of our work is open. So there is a portal that you can visit where all of the vertical standards are available for you to download and comment on continuously. And because of that, we've been getting a lot of the comments that would normally come in public inquiry have been coming a little earlier. So we're hoping that is going to help us to get ahead. But generally speaking, people are working insanely hard against impossible timescales. Despite that, actually bringing the goods forward and actually coming up with standards. And I'm very proud of the team of rapporteurs and participants that we have. Going forward, I think we're going to need a lot more engagement, and I think that it behoves everyone in the room to visit the ETSI Cyberstand portal. And if you go, I think it's Stand for CR is the portal, standforcr.org. Visit the portal, look at the standards, make your comments. If you don't do that, you have only yourself to blame. We've created this opportunity for you to comment on these standards without joining your national body, without joining ETSI. You can just look at the standard and comment, so please do.
Thank you, Simon. A very concrete action for audience. Now, Alexandre, so you come from the industry, you come from TSH home appliances. Most of the requirements do not apply for home appliances, so you are kind of off the hook, but you still need the standards to be there. So how do you assess the process so far?
Brotherly the mic here, hello. Yeah, good morning or midday, everybody. Yeah, that's correct. We do home appliances, so washing machines, fridges, and when they are connected, they are clearly CRA products. And we don't have any standard. Not even a standardization request, if I may look at the Commission. We are not off the hook, because at the end of the day, it's the law that counts. And if you have a standard, that it's a big help. If you don't have a standard, we are really in the situation that we prepare for the CRA by looking into the law, so into the annex, and go through the requirements, and now having proof of concepts to see how would that look like. I think it's also for everybody who is in a default category, you probably should start with the Annex 7 and try to draw up a technical documentation, because that's the first thing people would ask you. I mean, people are surveillance authorities, and that's easier said than done. You have lots of things probably available, but there are some open questions. And now to your question, do we need standards? The horizontal standards are already a big help. But as the colleague Nikos, I think, in the first talk says, there's a big difference between being secure and proving your compliance. We think we can be proud, and we have got lots of feedback that our products are very secure for being harmless home appliances. Still, what to prove? That's a big problem, and here that's actually the strength of the CRA. We were hoping for a kind of leveling playing field with respect to market access, because what we are doing, we hope everybody's doing. That's the whole idea of the CRA, and for this one needs standards as a kind of reference point. So where you say, this is at least enough as a starting point, and then you can, that was the idea of the CRA, maybe pick some of the products on the market and say, you're clearly off that limit, and then maybe we can do something against this, and this is what we need. So long story short, on the standardization, we are also active in there. We work on the horizontal standards. We honestly have lack of personnel to follow all the vertical standards at the same time, because the people who do the security, the real security, are the same who could work in standardization, and I think you all prefer a real secure product rather than a compliant product only. So that's a bit our challenge. So as you said, it was a great statement. I noted comment resolution burden, so there's still lots of things to do in standards. I know that myself. We hope that whenever there is something ready, that it's a help, but we would also maybe hope for a standardization request for default products. That is something which would be really helpful.
Thank you. So probably maybe I pick on the point on industry engagement before we go to other topics. We've seen this in also in the horizontal standards. The industry is there, but there is always a complaint that it's not the whole spectrum of industry, that we need them there in the room to make sure that we have A, quality standards, B, market relevant standards, because this is basically what standards are all about. They should be market driven, they should be industry led to make a case also for the compliance afterwards, as Alex said. So probably we need to discuss now ways of engaging the industry, and probably I start again with Luis Miguel. So how do you envision supporting this point? In the past, and we are still saying that the industry within the standardization system as a whole, not only for the CRA, is investing a lot. It is responsible of 93 to 97% of the costs of standardization, meaning that they have invested heavily, but we see now a reluctance from the industry to do so. Probably related to many administrative burdens at their end, not competitive as before, and they are now maybe making choices where to invest wisely in this process. So we know that in the past 3 or 4 years, the Commission has had some programs, some funding programs for SMEs, researchers, the open source community, to entice them to go and be more active on the CRA standardization. Now we are hearing that the industry is a little bit struggling. Do you envision something similar from the Commission side to support the industry?
Thank you, Mar, for the question. Well, let me be quite frank and clear with you. I've always thought that the job of a standardizer is a very tough one. So it's very difficult, it's a very bureaucratic thing. It's sometimes it can be exhausting to try to find a consensus among a very technical community. So it's very tough, but this is the way it works. This is standardization, which is based on consensus. This is the main pillar, let's say. So what we are doing here, what I hear in this panel is basically this is a long-standing issue. This is what we have been hearing for a long time. The industry is not sufficiently engaged. We do not participate in the standards. The European industry is lagging behind because there are other players who are coming, who are imposing their standards. I mean, this is the wording you typically hear here. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to work on 2 different aspects. First of all, is simplification. We are trying to simplify the process, to streamline the process. The European standardization organizations are quite, if you allow me to say that, they are quite bureaucratic. I mean, the adoption procedures are quite long, based on multiple consultations and multiple comments, resolution, which is a very tough thing. So we are trying to simplify this, and especially that the Commission is more and more involved in the standardization process. So in previous scenarios, maybe the standardizers were working independently, and then the Commission came at the end to check the standards. Now we want to be more proactive. We want to ensure that the standards are ready in time, and that's why, together with the revision of the standardization regulation, which is the main legal instrument we have, do not forget that the ESOs in Europe are private entities. That is very important to know. But the fact that they are European, that they have the label of European standardization organizations, this is regulated under the standardization regulation, and this is what we are, we did the first step, and now we are trying to improve it more. And the second thing is about the funding. The funding, we would like to hear from you. So do not hesitate to come to us and to tell us your proposals. But when it comes to funding, we need to be very clear. So we are funding SMEs because SMEs are not participating in the standardization fora. It's very expensive for them. You need to have experts, sometimes full-time experts. So we want to focus on SMEs. SMEs are more than 90% of our industry, so we need to focus on them. And second, we have focused on the role of the rapporteur. So we have spent money, we have invested money, better said, under some action grants. Now we are working on the third action grants, and the fourth one coming, on the role of the rapporteur. So the rapporteur is really the role that manages the technical committee, the one that has the lead on the definition, on the development of the standard, and we considered that this role has to be funded because it's a very exhausting role and we need to put money here. So that's why we have already adopted 2 action grants, a third one and a fourth one are coming, as I said, and this is what we are trying to do. Of course, if I can be clear with you, it's out of question that we can put public money in big industries because obviously you are presumed to have the resources. I mean, I know that this is a big statement, but it's also the interest of the industry to be present in the standardization fora. But please, let us know. I mean, we are happy to learn all the concerns. We have been working on a standardization for a long time, but we are not standardizers. So if you have proposals, if you have ideas to improve the participation of the, sorry to say, European industry. I'm from the European Commission, so I need to focus on the European industry. But if you have any ideas, please let us know because we are happy to hear.
All right, so maybe we turn out to the European industry next to me and see if they have ideas. But basically, in your opinion, Alex, what does the industry need to be more engaging in the CRA standardization? I mean, you've already mentioned that you don't have the resources to follow everything there, but in your opinion, what are the main issues for the industry of this lack of engagement?
Thanks for the mic. First of all, we do invest also in personnel a lot in standardization. The point is standardization is not only cybersecurity. So only in Europe, only the division for home appliances in Bosch has more than 60 people working in standardization for Europe, all over the countries, and so it's not nothing. In cybersecurity, it's not even a question of funding, because we, as I said before, industry has to look where they put their people to. And in doubt, you put them in secure products rather than sending the same person to standardizing. And here comes the main point. Of course, it is an investment in personnel. If you have the personnel, you still have to do A or B. What you then need in industry is predictability. It's really, if you invest something, what do you get back? And one of the issues we have here is the well-known discussion whether or not the standard will be eventually cited in the OJ with and without presumption of conformity. Even if it is cited in the OJ, there is the discussion, maybe it's cited but not giving presumption of conformity as the level A standards in machinery regulation. So there's lots of uncertainty. What does it mean for a CEO, for instance, to send a guy like me full-time into standardization? What do they get back? So this is one point in terms of uncertainty. And the other thing is, it's a typical thing which happens under high pressure. I think we all do a bit of activism here in Europe. If too many things happen at the same time, you cannot manage anymore. You simply cannot manage. And as we said, we have the verticals, which I'm happy that there are at least people working on there, but we focused on the horizontal ones. Then in our home appliance business, we focus on the work a bit like preparing the proof of concept for the real compliance. And then there is a big issue, last thing maybe, all these class 1 important products have this big uncertainty. If the standard is listed, you can use it. If you don't, you go to a notified body. This is a complete different process. So what we are currently having to do, you make an early bet, is the standard ready or not? And then possibly you go to a notified body, which you still have to find. So you have to run processes in parallel. So the uncertainty, I think, consists in the fact of that there is an uncertainty whether or not there will be listing of standards. There is an uncertainty in terms of there's too many things at the same time, so which horse you bet on. And the last thing, the uncertainty, is what happens with all these class 1 products. We don't have class 1 products, but we source, for instance, microprocessors and microcontrollers, and it is a big difference whether or not they need a certificate or they can do a self-assessment to get into Europe. So there's these three uncertainties, and if we can do anything to help here, I think that would be a step forward for us to do the right investment.
Thank you, Alex. So it goes also down to what you said, Luis Miguel, about the Regulation 1025 revision, the ability to assess and cite standards in quite timely manner. I think these are one of the three bottlenecks that's been identified by your colleagues at DG GROW. Hopefully things will be for the better. But I'm also intrigued to hear from the standardizers. So I guess it's more or less the problem of the ETSI and Sensenelec management to get the industry along and get them here. But how do you also cope with this lack of engagement? What ideas do you have?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Okay. The engagement of the industry is on the national body level, so it's not on the ETSI side or on maybe on the ETSI side, right? But in Sensenelec it comes from the national bodies and their organizations, and so you have to go through several steps, and how to engage the industry is different all over Europe. They have different regulatory how they involve the industry, and so there are maybe we have in Germany a very big national body also with industry, but not everybody of this industry then takes the step to the European level. Mostly they have been in the international level, and now we have a new level, the European level. This is for the industry something a bit new, so they need to focus now on that, and this makes it difficult because they need to go to all these three levels. And for Europe, let's say we have a lot of industry, let's say, registered, and then you have the difference if you always have a lot of people joining. I have heard now for Working Group 9, CRA, they have 450 people registered, but not working. They are participating. They are looking what is going on. But those who are working are very less, because this is an additional burden. You need the from your company the allowance that you can do this, because it's much more work to work on the standard than only to listen and go to the meetings. And this is what happens mostly. They maybe come, or they only take the documents and see what is going on or read the minutes, but do not really work on the standard. So there are very less people who are really working on the standard, and this is the issue. Yes, so that sometimes only the rapporteur or the editor is writing, or maybe 2 or 3 other peoples who are really engaged. And there's also a difference between bigger companies like Bosch or IBM or Siemens, but also they have not enough people to solve all these several working groups. They can send, they maybe have 3 peoples and they need to decide where to go, but you have, let's say, 10 or 15 groups to work in. Yes, so it's not possible to join every group and to work on this. And then you have several, you have ETSI, you have Senelec, you have the national bodies, so it's really a lot to do, and that's not possible. And for SMEs, it's nearly impossible. They have maybe 10 people or maybe nobody who is assigned to standardization, and they need their people for their own work and not to send it to standardization. And the funding is nice to have, it's a nice addition, but it does not pay the people for the work they do.
Yep.
Yes, for example, I work nearly my job is a full day job, yes, but the funding is nice for the travel costs, but not really for what I'm doing the whole day over the whole year. So I personally can do this, but not everybody can do this, and SMEs have not the possibility. So this is really a mess, and it's not, these standards are not intended by the industry, it's intended by the regulation. And so people looking what's going on, maybe we can take it and think how Bosch is doing that, what we can achieve, but to work in this is much more.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So I used to run a standards department for a multinational 15 years ago. I had 10 staff. Those 10 staff were responsible for covering standardization in every global standards body. So although a large organization may well have standard staff, when it comes to each individual standard, only a fraction of them is available. And so the role they tend to play in the standards committees is, I always said there were two roles in standardization. There is watching to make sure nothing bad happens, and there's engaging to make sure something good happens. And most of my staff were assigned to making sure nothing bad happened. And there were only very occasionally staff assigned to making something good happen. And the CRA has been a denial of service attack on most people's capacity. There are 16 vertical standards. There are 4 horizontal standards, each of which is an all-consuming lifestyle. It is simply impossible for anyone to participate across the board in all of these standardization activities. So there's been some innovations that have happened here. So the actions the Commission has taken to fund the rapporteurs have been brilliant. They've been an excellent move. Operationally, there's some improvements to be made, but I know about those because I'm too close to it. Generally, the thing is a great move. I believe the Commission should also be funding experts to participate. And I believe that each standard should have a designated Commission expert. That's kind of happening to a certain degree because the Commission officers have been, again, the Commission officers have been wonderful. We've had Felipe, we've had Camille, and they've been showing up all over ETSI to help with the work. But there's only 2 of them, and there's 16 standards, and they're not allowed to write any of it. So it would be great if when there were vertical standards, there were designated paid experts from the Commission. Finally, there are multiple pathways to compliance. And as is obvious, quite a lot of the people at this conference are well equipped to achieve a presumption of conformity using one of the many routes that are going to be available. And the route of complying with the standards may not be the most economically viable way of achieving compliance. And consequently, the very largest players have little incentive to participate, while the smaller players for whom this pathway to compliance is essential do not have the resources to participate. So you're in a catch-22 where the people who can won't, and the people who can't, who would like to be there, are unresourced. I think this is a deep conundrum that needs solving, because as it stands at the moment, it's not obvious to me that the ESOs are the correct tool for the Commission to gain a presumption of conformity for its regulations. And I'm looking forward very much to the new standards regulation and the improvements that it makes. Putting my other hat on as representing the open source initiative, we've also had a problem in that the CRA for the first time brings the origin of 80 to 90% of the software that's embedded in devices into regulation. So up until now, software has not really been regulated. It's only the effect it has on the device that is regulated. Now the software as is regulated. And so the Commission was forced to call in the open source community. And that has also led to a good deal of resourcing at ETSI. So a lot of the experts who are involved in the vertical standards at ETSI are from the open source community. And I have personally brought them into ETSI because there's no pathway for them to come in otherwise. I negotiated an arrangement with ETSI for OSI, who I work for, to appoint delegates from open source communities to join in with vertical standards. So there are structural issues that need dealing with. There is a need to resource expertise if you're going to mount another denial of service attack on the standards industry. And I think these are all within the Commission's remit, both of Regulation 1025 and also of the Blue Guide's language that it uses about standards.
Right. I may come back to one point on funding, but I give the floor to Luis Miguel to react.
Yes, so I would like to make a very short 2 comments. So first of all, well, thanks a lot for these insights. I think it's very helpful because you are from inside. So we are making a reflection in the Commission regarding the future of harmonized standards, and precisely what you said, Simon, the role of harmonized standards in presumption of conformity. You know, the European Union has always had this neutral approach. So we are not prescriptive, we do not impose any technologies. That's why standards are always voluntary. So many people don't know that, but we always say standards are voluntary. You are not obliged to comply with certain standards. Why is that? Because we are technology neutral, because we do not impose any certain technologies and certain standards. If you go to other jurisdictions in the world, it's the other way around. They are much more prescriptive. The regulator tells you exactly what you have to do, what you have to comply with. But this is not the case of the European Union, because we want to ensure competition and free market and things like that. So now the reflection is it the way forward? We need to think of anything more agile, maybe. This is a reflection that we are making. And second thing, on the CRA more specifically, let me be a bit more strategic, just to motivate you, if I may. You know, my post says something about international, coordination of international policy. So this is why, apart from the CRA, I coordinate the international cyber policy with third countries. So we travel a lot, we go to many places in the world. And I don't know if you know this, but the European Union is the only jurisdiction that has these mandatory requirements for the placing on the market of products from the cybersecurity point of view. We are the only ones in the world. In other places, I mean, if you go to Japan, they have labeling schemes, to Korea, to Singapore. The Americans are now maybe resuming this cyber trust mark they had for IoT devices. But all of these are basically voluntary things, voluntary stuff. And now in Europe, we have something mandatory. And we are developing the standards. So when we go to these multilateral platforms, everyone is looking at the European Union. So this is not just a Commission thing that we came up with one day to over-regulate our market and our countries. So this is basically something that is becoming a source of inspiration for many other jurisdictions. And you know what the standards might be potentially adopted by other countries? The ones that we are developing here in Europe. So the more we invest in these standards, the more we get familiar with them, the better we will be, you will be prepared for expanding your international business in other countries that might potentially adopt similar policies.
Thank you, Luis Miguel. I think this, I think these are one of the benefits of the European standardization system, linking it to the single market, being the backbone of the single market, but also for international competitiveness. This is a point that we already and always make. Standards are not only the backbone of the single market, but they are the backbone of the competitiveness. And you put it very well there. If I may come back to the 2 points. So first the funding and then the open source, because we do need to expand a little bit. But on funding, there has been a funding scheme. CyberStand, for example, ran for 3 years. I have to disclose that I was one of the evaluators of the applications coming. And in those applications, we always favored the SMEs, open source community, and the researchers to be more involved. Now, I hear numbers that are a little bit concerning, 400, 450 participants in the horizontal, but very few. So could be also a way of thinking from the Commission itself also on how this funding should work at the end. What is the impact? What is the end result? So our people are getting funded to just sit and listen and then report back to the one who funded them, or are they doing actual work? So this is something that is really needs to be examined. And I think even the situation at JTC1 is maybe a little bit worse because the number is actually higher. But this is maybe something also to reflect. I don't know if there is an immediate reaction to that point, or we should go to the open source.
So I can tell you how about the funding. I get some of the funding. There is the Stand ICT, what I really much like, but this is done by single experts. So I ask for that, and this is a request. Let's say I provide what I want to do, and then it's a try and error. I don't know if I get the money. Yes, so sometimes it works, sometimes not. So you don't know if you get the money. So, and this leads to uncertainties. Can you, let's say, go on with the work, or do you need to stop? Can you do the travel, or can you do not the travel? So that is a bit uncertain. And it's I requested the long-term funding, and that's about, yes, a bit not. It's really helping, but not, let's say, really paying me for what I'm doing. And I think that's the same with the other experts who get the funding, because this is restricted to some of daily and what you mentioned, and also in the amount. Yes, it's not related to what we are doing. It's good that we have that, but it needs to be extended. And if I look to other countries, maybe China or something like that, they really fund their people for standardization in another dimension than we do that. And this is on the European level, but also in Germany, I don't know really. There is some funding, but I don't think that it really helps at the end. Yes. Thank you.
Well, let's move on. Happy to share a high-level forum report on funding, which also tackles.
Yes, please ask me.
This one. So, a quick reaction from Alex, and then we go to a small point on open source, and then go because we are about to finish. There is a lot of questions on the implementation as well. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing that might be not obvious for people on a cyber standard conference. Standards are outside this community not understood in their value by the society, not at all. For me, standards are like streets. They are necessary to do business. And nobody asked my company to invest in streets. It's a member state issue. I'm really surprised. Everybody's talking about standards. That's great. But then if you ask, then they look at us and say, "Why don't you engage?" I could also say, "Why don't you you buy streets? You make schools?" I think somebody should, the society as such needs to understand better. So we all have to make advertisement, but it also goes to the member states. You cannot just say they are there, they are great, and then you don't do anything. It's a bit like democracy. If you don't do anything before it, it's gonna be gone. And I think that's the same thing with the standardization system. Everybody has a value in there, and I'm simply advocating for saying that, because otherwise it's a question of investment, and if member states think standards come for free, then we will lose the global game for the ones who have fully understood that. Sorry. Needed to say that.
No worries, thank you. So probably, I don't know, Simon, if you want to assess the open source engagement so far, the problems. Before I give you the floor, just a question of, and you can answer afterwards because I still have some questions for you. From your second point, do we dare to dream of the old good day standardization request, like you know, the old standardization requests? Very simple, very direct. So I'll leave you with that and then come back to you. So Simon.
Yes. So let me tell you a story. Several years ago, I was at an open source event happening in Brussels called FOSDEM, where all of Europe's open source developers get together to party in a weekend in February out at a university, which is just as bad as it sounds. There was a presentation there from somebody from the European Commission, a very intelligent, very lovely person who had been involved in writing the CRA. And he told us how open source was going to be exempted from the CRA. And we were kind of suspicious by that. And so we read the draft CRA, and we discovered that actually open source was not exempt from the CRA. Although it was intended to be, the language used in the draft CRA brought it completely within scope. So we engaged very heavily for a year, helping to improve the CRA. And as a result of that, the Commission began to realize that open source was a fundamental part of the software that was in use throughout the European Union. In fact, research shows between 75 and 90% of the software that is in use, that's in commercial use in Europe, originates from open source communities. And so when the CRA was promulgated, the standards request had two unique articles in it. Article 1 required that the standards bodies must consult with stakeholders, especially the open source community. And Article 2 said, I'll paraphrase it for you, it said, we don't believe you'll do this, so you're going to have to prove you did. And that was Article 2. And the consequence of this part of the standards request was that both ETSI and Sensenelec realized that they didn't have any capacity whatsoever to consult with the open source community. And so the organization where I work, the Open Source Initiative, we're the organization that is the steward of the definition of open source globally. And we were invited to participate. So OSI funds me to do all of the things that we're doing around open source. We discovered that it was impossible to get the people who actually work on the vertical standards involved at either CEN or at ETSI. ETSI required them to become members and had a lengthy and complex process to do that. CEN required them to join a national committee, a mirror committee, and then work their way up into the top level committee. And working out how to get the person who works on security in OpenSSL into one of those roles, it was impossible to use the official pathways. At CEN, it's an ongoing problem. At ETSI, OSI joined as a member and then sponsors OSI community members to join in with the standards work. So just for the CRA, there has been heavy engagement from the open source community, and the standards that are being created will not disqualify the open source components that you wish to use in your products. They would have done if we hadn't have engaged, but they won't do that because we've had so many people engaged. At Senelec, CEN has a Mode 4 liaison with ETSI, and so all of these same people have been able to attend Working Group 9 meetings and help improve the horizontal standards as well. So just for the CRA, the open source community is able to be present. Now for the next round of standards, none of these special games that I have played will exist. So there won't be any open source people in the next round of standardization. And this is a defect that we need to fix in the Regulation 1025 improvement and in the bylaws of ETSI and Senelec. But that's beyond the scope of what we're saying here. So my summary for you, lots of open source people around. That open source software that you utterly depend on for all your products will not be disqualified. There will hopefully be a mechanism for you to secure attestations from the open source communities whose code you consume that will contribute towards your presumption of conformity. If you're interested in any of those things, come and talk to me afterwards. The attestations work is happening at the Eclipse Foundation in the Open Regulatory Compliance Group. The open source rapporteurs are all at ETSI and are now too busy to attend SEN. That's your update.
So in a minute, because we need to go into the next section before
one statement in addition.
Yeah.
If you join the national body committees and also then Senelec or ETSI, you need to pay.
Yeah.
So this is an addition. So the company needs to decide, do we pay for standardization at first, and then we pay the experts, and then we pay the travel. So this is all coming up, and this is a bit different in the open source surrounding. You need not to pay to join, but in Senelec and ETSI you need to pay to join, and this is an amount to think about.
If we hadn't made these special arrangements, there would have been nobody there.
Yes.
Because nobody would have been able to even afford the membership fees at ETSI, let alone the staff time to attend or the travel costs.
Yeah. Yes. So the pay-to-play business model has been there for years now. There is an occasion to look, from ETSI and Senelec to look at their own business models with the regulation coming. But coming back to the CRA implementation. So Luis Miguel, I think now things are put in place. We have now a CRA expert group. The ATCO CRA has also started working on the requirements, etc. Several guidelines are in the making. I think that there was recently a guideline shared in the last expert group meeting. Can you provide an overview of the Commission's preparations? What are still the pressing issues to ensure that the CRA and the compliance with the CRA, with the harmonized standards or different routes are in place by the applicability dates?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So I think that the CRA is probably the most important file we have in cybersecurity policy, at least in the short term, regarding the implementation. So we have a number of them, but the CRA is really super important. And the CRA implementation, we are putting a lot of effort on that, and it's based on basically 3 pillars. So one is the provision of guidance for the industry. This is a very technical topic, very hard, very difficult with many different specific cases. So we have issued a document, a draft guidance that has been, I think, appreciated, if I can dare to say that, by the industry, by the stakeholders. It's open for public consultation. So this document tries to clarify a number of use cases, a number of provisions of the CRA. So this has been the first pillar. The second pillar is standards. So the standards will definitely support implementation of the CRA. Just a personal comment, I think they are key for the credibility of the CRA, even though they are voluntary, even though we always have to say this message, but I think this is the benchmark that the industry needs in practice, that the market surveillance authorities need in practice, and that the notified bodies need as well. So everyone wants standards, so that's why we are focusing and we are making efforts and we are accompanying the standardizers in this journey. And the third pillar is conformity assessment. So we really need to work together with the conformity assessment bodies. We have started a very intense work stream with them, notifying authorities in member states, conformity assessment bodies. Actually, I can announce that we are going to create a working group with conformity assessment bodies, with the bodies that are interested in becoming CRA notified bodies, to streamline the process. There is a provision in the CRA saying that by the end of the year we should have a sufficient number of notified bodies. And this is very important because we need to create a market. And this is as well market opportunities for the certification for the conformity assessment sector. And we need these bodies because for some categories, as Alex said before, we need notified bodies. The manufacturer needs to go to a notified body. So even though you use standards, you need to go to these bodies to check that you did the right job. So these are the 3 pillars, and there is a 4th one, which is market surveillance, but I put it a bit aside because it's not immediate. I mean, they will start to operate in basically a couple of years. So we are putting a lot of effort, as I said, let me stress that, but on standards, they are one of the main pillars. We are accompanying you. But do not forget that we need to have a holistic view. So it's not only about standards, it's about interpretation of the use cases. For example, what is a risk assessment, how a risk assessment has to be performed, in which cases one product is covered, is not covered, what happens to the open source community, which has been, you have always been in the, I would say, in the center of the CRA. There are a number of provisions related to all the open source, so hopefully we manage to address the specificities of this community and how in practice we are going to perform the procedures to place products on the market. So this is in a nutshell the overview of the implementation stage.
Thank you, Luis Miguel. If I may react to 2 points and then give the floor for the panelists to react as well. So with regard to the notified bodies, how do you envision the competence should be assessed specifically for the products that will not be able to use the harmonized standards to show compliance? So they need to go and we need to know that these notified bodies have the competence. So do you have any idea about that? And then my second point is, hopefully the harmonized standards will be available by time the companies will have the transition time needed to do this. But actually, Camille, your colleague Camille, in the last ENISA ESO's standard about 10 days ago. No, actually, it was our working group. Not in the ENISA. So in our working group, your colleagues were saying that if standards are not ready, there is a possibility of being late. There could be some intermediate steps to show complaints. Can you also a little bit expand on this?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So on the first question on the notified bodies, let me just show a bit my Eurocrat side. So this is a national competence. It's not an European competence. So I have to say that the notified bodies are assessed, designated, notified, and monitored by the national authorities. So the role of the Commission here is a voluntary one. So what we are trying to do is to ensure that we have a level playing field. I always say that the notified bodies, this is a market. So this is not like the certification world in which you have public authorities that, no. I mean, this is really a market, a private market of caps. So what we are trying to do is ensure a level playing field. So we have created a working group with the notifying authorities in order to ensure that all caps in Europe are equally assessed so that they demonstrate the same level of expertise, the same level of competences. So we have drafted documents in cooperation with our ENISA colleagues. We are proposed a number of measures, pragmatic measures, so that the assessment can speed up as much as we can. And also I would like to refer to the accreditation procedure, because notifying authorities will rely on accreditation. They will not, in principle, they will not assess the bodies under an in-house model. They will go to the accreditation bodies. So in this regard, again, the accreditation, we need to ensure that it's homogeneously applied all across Europe. We are issuing a number of documents, a number of guidance for them, so that we can ensure that it's, as I said, homogeneously applied and there are no divergences among countries. And when it comes to the, let's say, interim solutions for harmonized standards, obviously it's not our preferred options. And as I said in the very beginning, we are happy with the current development of a standard. We think that we can achieve having standards in the OJ in due time, or relatively good timing. But if you take a look to the CRA, you will see that there are other solutions, such as common specifications. I mean, the trend of the Commission is common specifications. Another possibility is not having standards at all. So it means that the manufacturer does not have presumption of conformity, but, well, I mean, there are some drafts. So we are considering all this, but we are limited by the options we have in the law. And what we want to do is to be very transparent with you. So this means that if there are standards that we cannot publish, for example, because there are issues, we would like to let you know where the issues are, so that at least you can check that there is a part of the standard that is okay, let's say. So we want to be very transparent with you, with industry. This is what we can do. I mean, we are not standardizers in the Commission. We are not competent to do this. But we want to, I mean, our main priority is to rely in the ESOs and to complement as much as we can with our assessment.
All right. I'm looking for the whole session manager. Do we still have like 10 minutes for questions and answers, or 5 minutes? Okay, so any immediate reaction from the panelists, or should we open for the audience for maybe 2 questions? Have gentlemen here, Peter, and you. So this is the easiest.
Thanks, Omar. Peter Kelleher from Dell. My question goes back to a point that Alex raised earlier in the discussion about the citation of the standards. I mean, publication of harmonized standards is very important for manufacturers, but it's only the first step. And until this time that the standard is cited in the official journal, the manufacturer does not have presumption of conformity, and it hugely informs the decisions he has to make for conformity assessment, costs, planning, capacity of notified bodies, and all that. So do the panel at this early stage anticipate any delays in the citation process, particularly with regard to the assessments that will be carried out by the HAS consultants?
Please.
I mean, kind of above my pay grade. As regards the vertical standards, we are on track, I believe, to deliver all 16 of the vertical standards that are coming through ETSI on the timescale that the Commission has requested. Modulo comment fatigue. Once that has happened, it is out of our hands how long it takes the OJ to actually cite it. My personal view, unrelated to any view ETSI might hold, is that takes far too long. But I believe we will deliver on time, so I don't think it's unlikely that EUSR will be the source of any of the delays in citation.
But probably, we can also say that it is ENISA and the GRC or the Commission who are assessing the standards, and then they will be cited. So it's not the typical HAS consultant. And from your also maybe experience with the RED cybersecurity standards, maybe you can give us a little bit of
yeah, so I would like to highlight 2 elements here to speed up the citation process. So first of all is this continuous involvement of the Commission staff together with our experts within the Commission, ENISA and JRC. These are the expertise services. So we are monitoring that. We are providing continuous feedback to the standardizers so that our comments can be taken into account in the earlier stages of the process. So this is basically the technical staff, the essence of the standards, and then the administrative or the bureaucratic part, if I may have say. So first of all, when it comes to the standardizers procedure, it's not our business, if I may use this wording, so it's up to them to speed up. And when it comes to us, of course, we also have some internal procedures, but we want to speed up as much as we can. So if the standard has already been assessed during the development phase, that means that the final assessment will be much quicker. So we are trying to reduce the timing as much as we can. And also we want to give transparency also to you, to the industry. So as long as the standard is okay for citation, we want to let you know. I mean, there is an administrative procedure, but we don't want to be excessively cautious in the sense of not sharing this information until it is published in the OJ. No, we really want you to get ready to use the standards, and we will tell, okay, it's of course without prejudice of we want to include some caveat, but we want to be transparent because the timing is already very tight, so we need to provide transparency and efforts in this regard.
Thank you. Maybe we move to the second question.
Thank you. I'm Frans Nielsen and I work in a standard writing body in Finland. I think it's important to talk about this developing the standardization process and the timelines. Last week we had an interesting discussion with our Finland's high-level forum member from the ministry, and we heard that if we look at the standardization request development timeline from the starting point to its adaptation, the average time is 6.1 years. So if we talk about speeding up the development of harmonized standards, I think this is one of the key points that should be seen to in the commissions, that we actually speed up the standardization request development time. Also, I can understand that there's like, if we think about the current regular standardization development time, which is 36 months for a good standard, we could easily cut like 4 months from that time if you would allow the HAS consultants to actually join the working groups, because currently there's always approximately 1 month delay each time we wait for HAS consultant comments. So if they would just directly join the working groups, then we wouldn't have these delays, and also then it would be easy to get the processes, for example, sent to the online standard development tool, which would likely cut more time because it would help the quality check development process time. Also, lastly, of course, the reference in the official journal, currently, at least in machinery sector, getting the reference takes from 1 year to 5 years. So that is maybe something that could also be worked on if we want them to come out and be used by the industry. Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of recurring issues that we've been discussing for the last 2 years, but if any, if you have any immediate reaction.
Thanks for the question. A very quick reply from my side. Well, I think what you say makes a lot of sense. Indeed, the classic, standardization is a slow thing. So it doesn't happen immediately because of the consensus that I said before and because of the bureaucratic processes in both sides, ESOs and Commission. So that's why under this simplification approach recently adopted by the President of the Commission, we are trying to streamline the adoption procedure and the publication citation procedures. Unfortunately, life, and I come back to your, Omar, to your previous question on how standardization requests work. Life in the past was much easier because we had this framework and standardization request in which the standardizers could update standards very easily. Now it is no longer the case because the standards following a ruling from the Court of Justice, the famous James Elliott case, they said that the harmonized standards are part of the European law. That's why the European Commission has to assess the standards very carefully, and we cannot request this, let's say, framework requests to the standardizers to develop and to update standards according to the evolution of the technology. So this is something that unfortunately we need to live with. So what we can do is working in two different fields, trying to simplify the regulation and trying to de facto be more agile, cooperating with the technical committees, providing transparency to the industry. But let me just simply finish by saying that you said something very specific, which is the participation of the HAS consultants in the technical committees. I think we need to reflect on that. I don't think I fully agree with you because this kind of HAS consultants or experts that assess the standards, we also need to provide a certain level of independence. So we need to avoid conflict of interest. We need to ensure that they are, let's say, a step behind the technical committee and they are not getting involved in the discussion. So this is a reflection that we are making. I don't have a clear solution for you, but just to let you know that we are trying to make a reflection on this.
Thank you, Luis Miguel. So on the one hand, we do value the presence of the Commission in the consensus building process. On the other hand, if it's a third party, then it's about independence and conflict of interest. So I think these are things to maybe walk with this and maybe have more reflections for the upcoming regulation 1025. I see Ingrid wants to make an intervention, and then we close.
Yes, a short, let's say, reflection what I have faced, and I think Working Group 9 and others as well. So we very much appreciate the participation of the European Commission. We have this as well. But at the end, what we have seen, and we have not been the only one, we work together with the Commission, and they participated in the meetings. They had every chance to say you are in the right direction. And after 8 months, they made a deep dive, and then they come back and say, oh, that needs a lot of time, this deep dive, and then they came back and said, please, we need a restructuring. And this should not happen. So it's more a try and error. We should know from the beginning and a very clear direction, and not working 8 months in one direction, then throw everything away and start again and restructure. This is not the way, I think, which is efficient for both sides. So there should be more at the beginning and during they are participating, that all are working in the right direction, and maybe not so much in the details. We should not stay on the details. The goal is to achieve the goal and not the way how to achieve the goal for the regulation. But at the moment, they are too much integrated in the way, and that brings us to a lot of problems and discussions and reaching consensus, because we are not all we do not all have the same opinions on how to achieve. But the goal, there is no discussion.
Yeah. I think the CRA and also GTC 21 is something to learn from for the future. Probably we need to bring the agile process into the whole thing, iterations, and once we agree on something, we don't go back. But in general, the commissions being in the room is good for the consensus building, because it mitigates the problems. And of course, we need to not come eight months later and say, we had a problem like
it's
in
an agile process sometimes, and that's not
Yeah.
the question, but to come after 8 months
Exactly.
and say, we have been
Exactly.
participating,
So I
and then
think
it's
this
different.
is to reflect
This is
on
difficult.
the regulation 1025 on how to manage the process better. I see that, maybe we can continue for another hour, but we need to stop. So for the manufacturers out there, watch out for the harmonized standards. They are coming, and please prepare for your products to be compliant with the CRA, specifically mics in a conference. With that, I would like to thank again our distinguished panelists who provided good information today, and I hope you all enjoyed the panel. Please join me for a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.